Okay, let's look at how to spot a human trafficker.
So yeah, I'm here today. Hello. So once upon a time, about 11,000 years ago, during the Neolithic Revolution, agriculture was invented, which meant that suddenly these guys turned into these guys, which meant that we ended up with these guys. Because where you have an increased population density and a robust economy, as you do with farming, then you have people who do the work and you have people who manage people who do the work. So yeah, I'm here today to talk about slavery and about the choice that we have, you and me, to perpetuate it or to stop it. So Neolithic Revolution, hunters-gatherers, farmers, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward 11,000 years to today. We don't really talk about slavery anymore. We're much more sophisticated than that. We talk about human trafficking. Human trafficking. Human and trafficking. Innocuous, right? Two perfectly ordinary words. Put them together, they form an innocuous phrase used to describe a horrific reality. Human trafficking. It conjures up images of people riding in trains from city to city, or people sipping their mocha frappe latte while they sit with 10,000 of their closest friends on the I-5, bumper to bumper, or the I-95. Human trafficking. Now toss in the word sex. Well, now you've got something to sell papers with, or talks like this one. Human sex trafficking. We also call it the commercial sexual exploitation of children. That's a mouthful. We give it acronyms like CSEC or DMST, I suppose to hide its hideousness. Human sex trafficking. We like to talk about numbers. $45 million spent per year in the US for online sex trafficking alone. 21 million people enslaved globally. 300,000, that's the number of US children at risk for human trafficking each year. That's 300 of these slides with 1,000 figures, and it's enough to fill Citizen Bank Park almost 7 times over. $200,000 per year is what a pimp stands to make from just one victim. 15 years. That's the age by which most child victims are lured into sex trafficking, 15 years old. That's 9th grade. But I'd like to get away from the numbers, which are somewhat unreliable and likely the tip of the iceberg in many cases. See, when we try to count these traffickers, when we see them, they vanish, they scatter, they morph, they change into the nice lady down the street, or her uncle, his boss, her boyfriend. They live among us, and so do their victims. So I'm a physician. I knew about human trafficking. I read the news. I read about the sex trafficking ring in Bosnia, run by UN peacekeepers in the year 2000. I read about sex tourism in Thailand. I read Cheryl Woodan and Nicholas Kristof's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Half the Sky. Good read. I knew about human trafficking for organs, for labor, for sex. It happened in other countries until I saw it in our operating room. Now, my patients, they feel like my family. My patients' identities are obviously confidential, and their stories really aren't mine to tell. But my patients are memorable, and they're more compelling than any numbers. And they've really shaped the way that I think about others. So yes, while I was in medical school, I was in the operating room for what was actually quite a benign and mundane surgery, except for the fact that this woman had needed this surgery eons ago. So she came in, she was anesthetized, and then we undraped her to clean the areas for incision, and there it was. Dollar signs tattooed into her groin. Expletives tattooed into her groin. Now, thankfully, none of us laughed. None of us traded lewd comments about the patient. Instead, we just looked at each other in surprise. And we just figured, well, to each her own. We missed it. I missed it. I didn't see it. I didn't see her. So lesson number one, it is said that the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't know. We didn't know what we were seeing because we didn't know what we were looking at. We didn't know the signs right in front of us, the tattoos, the late presentation to medical care. These are typical signs of sex trafficking right in front of us. And if we as healthcare professionals don't make it our business to learn about human trafficking, then we will miss it every time. So fast forward 1 year, and I'm now a pediatric intern on labor and delivery. So that means that I have my MD, but I'm now training to be a pediatrician. A young lady is brought in from the street, and she has delivered her baby on the street when the ambulance couldn't get there in time. By the time the baby made it to my care, it was cold, but otherwise remarkably healthy. The young woman sat in bed, quite composed, full makeup, beautiful hair, manicured nails, jeweled, and there was a man who stood in the corner. I figured he was the father, so I walked over to congratulate him, and he stared me down, crossed his hands in front of his chest, and said nothing. So I made my way back to the woman, and I asked her, so, did you get any prenatal care? She said no, she didn't need prenatal care. And I said, okay, well, how long were you in labor? She said that she had been having contractions for 3 or 4 days, but she had to work, so she just took painkillers and kept working. So I asked her, what kind of work would prevent you from coming into the hospital to deliver your baby? And she paused, and then she said that she was a receptionist. She looked uneasy. I felt uneasy. I had 3 or 4 other deliveries to attend to, so I left. I didn't follow up. I didn't attempt to get her by herself away from her very intimidating male partner so that I could ask her more questions. I was frightened. So I said to a nurse, there is something really wrong in that room, and then I left. Lesson number 2, it is not enough to see. We have got to act, and it is hard to act. It takes courage, it takes training, it takes support, it takes a team of people to help us to help others. And we have got to stand up and step in, because if we don't, then it's possible that nobody else will. Now, there are some patients for whom I did step in. There's the 15-year-old white middle-class girl who came into our emergency department after running away from her parents. She had been on the street for about 4 days. And I asked her some of the screening questions that I had learned to ask after training with GEMS. GEMS is Girls Education Mentoring Services. It's a nonprofit organization in New York City that specializes in working with female victims of sex trafficking. So I walked up to this patient and I said, look, I'm a physician. I don't mean any offense, but I've seen a lot of different kids from a lot of different situations, and I just need to know, when you were on the streets, did you have to trade sex for anything, for food, for shelter, for money? She shrugged and she said, yeah, sure, I needed a place to stay. And I traded sex for a Happy Meal once. I took in this information without shock, without disgust. This was simply her reality. Thankfully, that particular patient was not being trafficked, but she was at risk. See, 1/3 of kids who run away from home are approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of running away. They're approached in a park, at the bus stop, at the mall, even in school. Some kids even keep going to school while they're being trafficked. They live at home and they go to school. So in my 3rd year of residency in pediatrics, I was in the emergency department and I overheard an emergency medicine doc discussing one of the patients who had just come into the ER. And as I listened, something sounded off. She gave some fuzzy answers to questions about sex and about risk for sexually transmitted infection. And so I said to this ER doc, hey, I don't mean to pry, but it seems like your patient might be in the life, which is slang for sex trafficking. He kind of laughed a little, and then he looked at me like I had 2 heads, and he said, oh, okay. So I said to him, look, would you mind if I asked your patient some questions? And he said, sure, go ahead. So I did, and it turned out this girl and her friends were being bussed into the city by their pimp every weekend. to work the hotels, to work the conferences, and then they were being bused back to school on Monday. They turn in their homework, they watch their little brothers and sisters after school until mom gets home, they come to see their doctors, and they're trafficked. This particular girl came into our emergency department with her pimp, who soon fled. And then this girl told the emergency medicine docs that she just wanted her mommy. Lesson number 3, be prepared to be derided. People still roll their eyes at me. I've been mocked. I consider it a small price to pay for doing what I know is right. And I am happy to report that many of my patients have been connected to resources, to housing, job training, and legal resources. Lastly, I spoke recently at a medical school, and the medical school student said to me, "How is it that you see so many trafficked patients?" I don't think I see any more trafficked patients than other physicians. It's just that I've developed eyes to see them. And I ask. And I just want to close with some of the resources, because people frequently ask me, what can I do? Some of the resources that I mentioned are GEMS. They are nonprofit. Donations go a long way with this organization. They house trafficked girls. PATH is one of the organizations that I helped found, the Physicians Against the Trafficking of Humans, and we do a lot of research and we spend our time educating medical professionals. And then there are a number of other places, Dawn's Place here in Philadelphia, Sanctuary for Families, Covenant House, that offer services to trafficked youth. HEAL is an academic source for people in law enforcement and medicine who work on the issue of human trafficking. And for your definitive resource, go to Polaris Project Online. They have all of the updated stats for the United States and globally. Thank you.
All right, let's check out another video here. I think I have to go back one.
The 2008.
Okay, I want to look at this Human Trafficking 101. Traffickers.
Hi, I'm Detective Joseph Scaramucci with the McLennan County Sheriff's Office. I've worked hundreds of trafficking cases over the past 6 years, and I want to share with you what I've learned about traffickers and buyers. First, we have to understand that human trafficking, like all industries generating profit, is about supply and demand. We know that the supply side of human trafficking is the victims, the people who are used and exploited. The demand side is the buyers, the people who are seeking to pay for the services provided by victims. And the person in the middle is the trafficker. The trafficker is a person who, through force, fraud, or coercion, is providing the victim to the buyer. So who are these sex traffickers? In sex trafficking, a trafficker may be better known as a pimp. Now take a minute and think about what comes to mind when you think of the word pimp. Based on music and movies, you probably have a pretty distinct image of what comes to mind. But as someone who has encountered and arrested a lot of pimps over the years, I have to tell you, most don't look like this. I'm about to show you a group of photos. Take 10 seconds and decide who you think the pimp is. You may have guessed it, but all of these people have been arrested for sex trafficking. In 2018, a Travis County, Texas woman conspired with her boyfriend to traffic a 14-year-old girl, lured the girl through Tagged, a social media app, used threats of force to make her perform sex acts, is now serving 40 years in prison. In 2018, a Houston, Texas man was running a massage business out of his home using a 15-year-old boy to give massages to clients. Paying customers were allowed to engage in sexual activities with that boy. He did this to multiple boys. He also tried to traffic this boy to the Summer Olympics in London in 2012. He's now serving a 30-year prison sentence. In 2016, a Waco man who was 51 years old harbored a 15-year-old runaway girl and charged men to have sex with her while keeping her high on heroin. He's now serving 12 consecutive life sentences. In 2018, a junior high teacher in a small town, Mahia, Texas, was accused of posting nude photos of her underage family member and arranging for multiple men in Morocco to have sex with her. In 2019, a former District of Columbia police officer who met 2 ninth-grade girls online, 14 and 15 years old, and paid them to have sex with him. He pointed a gun at one of the girls, demanding his money back after she performed a sexual act. He's now serving 10 to 20 years in prison. From 2012 to 2015, a woman sold her 10-year-old daughter to a businessman multiple times over several years. He promised to pay the victim's tuition, and provided the mother with expensive electronics and other gifts. The 67-year-old businessman was convicted of sex trafficking of a minor. As disturbing as it is to hear stories like this, these types of cases are really happening in the communities around America. These stories remind us that traffickers come in many forms. They could be from the United States or they could be from another country. They could be family members or partners of the victims or total strangers. Traffickers can be male or female. They could be individuals, part of an organized group, or gangs. Another group guilty of human trafficking is recruiters. A recruiter is used by a trafficker to find potential victims. These recruiters often seek out vulnerabilities that make a person easier to manipulate. Things like low self-esteem, history of abuse, running away from home, or unsupervised internet access increase a young person's vulnerability. Recruiters look for their victims in places where youth are often unsupervised. They might hang out at malls and parks, befriend youth in schools or local libraries, meet runaway youth at a bus stop, youth shelters, or online. Even though a recruiter isn't the person directly selling or trafficking the victim, according to the law, they are still guilty of human trafficking. So we know traffickers and recruiters do what they do so they can make a profit. But who's driving the demand? The buyers. Like traffickers, buyers also come in many forms. Over the years, I've arrested more than 450 buyers in human trafficking stings. I've picked up buyers as young as 17 years old and as old as 75. They come from every segment of society. They are married and single, businessmen, doctors, construction workers, and the unemployed, just passing through, or prominent community members. Most buyers are there because they, 1, think it's a victimless crime, 2, think they won't get caught, and 3, have a sex addiction or feel unable to get their sexual needs met in any appropriate way. But the truth is this: there are very real victims whose lives are being destroyed through their actions. There are law enforcement like me looking to hold them accountable. Exploiting another person is never an acceptable way to have your needs met. A lot of these buyers also admit that the chain of events that led them to seeking to buy sex, and especially for those seeking sex with a minor, all started with an addiction to pornography. My job as a detective is to investigate these crimes and hold the perpetrators accountable. But I also care about the victims impacted by these crimes. That's why I depend on Unbound advocates to be there to help the survivors get the care and support that they need. And whenever I train on human trafficking investigations around the country, I tell other law enforcement it's vital that they identify an agency in their community that can provide services to these survivors. So we talked about traffickers, recruiters, and buyers, but where does that leave you? As a member of your community, first of all, commit to not being part of the problem. Don't buy sex. Don't let yourself get on the slippery slope of pornography addiction, which leads so many people to buying sex. Don't exploit and don't take advantage of other people. Keep your eyes and ears open. If you see something suspicious, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline or your local law enforcement. If your community isn't educated about human trafficking, help organize an awareness event or advocate for education in your schools. If you have young people in your life, talk to them about trafficking, online safety, and pornography. Be a safe place for them when they screw up. And get involved with and donate to organizations like Unbound so they can continue to be there for the survivors that law enforcement recovers. Whatever you do, take action and be a part of the solution.
Okay, let's take a look at one more thing.
The 2008 movie Taken depicted.
All right, let's go back to that. Sorry. All right, here we go.
The 2008 movie Taken depicted human traffickers breaking into a house and dragging away teenage girls to sell them on an overseas black market.
But experts know these criminals often use more subtle and strategic methods. That's why the Blue campaign by the Department of Homeland Security is supporting 2 new California laws that require awareness training for transit, hotel, and motel workers. These are industries in which employees are most likely to encounter trafficking victims. There are things that everybody should know about how these criminals operate. Mary David is a former prosecutor and UN advisor. She joins us this morning with the 5 common traps used by human traffickers. Good morning to you.
Welcome.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So the first trap something so simple, and maybe you wouldn't even think to begin here. What should we know about human traffickers' approach to women and girls by telling them that they're beautiful?
Traffickers often tell women and girls that they're beautiful, and what they do is they will actually scope out places where women and girls will often hang out. They will go to malls, school playgrounds, and the movie theater, and they'll approach these potential victims and tell them, "You're beautiful," and see how they respond. If the woman or girl responds with a lot of confidence and seems unfazed, they move on. But if she seems uncomfortable with the compliment, if she looks down and can't make eye contact, or if she says, "No, I'm not beautiful," then they know that this is someone who they then can manipulate and use as a potential victim.
Another trap you talk about is false offers of job opportunities.
Yes. Traffickers are increasingly using social media to target women and girls with job opportunities by sending them messages on their photos or sending them direct messages saying, "We can find you an opportunity in television, film, and dance." And they will often even get these women and girls into a small music video or get them a job at a nightclub. And while it may start out as seemingly professional and seemingly just dance, it often escalates into commercial sexual exploitation.
This next trap is especially sinister. Human traffickers stepping in as a parental figure. Is that to establish trust and then they go from there?
Yes, that's exactly what happens. Traffickers will actually spend months scoping out a potential victim, and they will determine what their social habits are, who their support networks are, whether they have close relationships with their family members. If they don't, this is someone that they will then, it's called grooming, and they will buy them things like sneakers. They will take them to get their hair and their makeup done, to get their nails done, and create this bond and fill in a gap that often a family member like a mother or a father would often fill. And this is a void that children are so often hungry for. And so to be recognized in that way, it makes it so much easier for them to then establish loyalty and trust to this trafficker, who then completely uses it to manipulate them.
With so many people using online methods to sort of find companionships, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, you say that some of these traffickers pose as a potential boyfriend.
Absolutely. Increasingly, social media apps like WhatsApp, Snapchat, and Instagram are being used by traffickers to send out messages to women and girls that seem harmless at first. They will just tell them that they're beautiful. They will just strike up conversations with them. And over time, it's easy for someone to feel like they know this person, even though they really don't know them at all. They're just hiding behind a screen, and it's a stranger. But by establishing this contact through social media, which then can ramp up to phone calls and then finally an in-person meeting, they already feel like they have this connection and they have a relationship with this person. And then what happens is they then say, once they actually get close and do start dating, I'm really short on money. Just one time, will you do this for me one time? I'm only asking you because I feel so bad to do this, but I trust you and I know that you love me.
Yeah.
And it's never just one time.
Right. Once again, Mary David, a former prosecutor and anti-sexual exploitation advocate, travels around the country speaking to groups and raising awareness about human trafficking. Mary, thank you for coming in this morning.
Thanks.
I am so glad that so many men and women are coming forward about sexual assault and sexual harassment that they've experienced in the workplace. Given its prevalence, I wanted to share with you some key signs to look for of a sexual predator. Number one, a sexual predator is someone who is extremely powerful. This may be in terms of financial capital, so they're super wealthy. It could be that they are very high in social capital. They are the go-to person when you want to know someone of influence, they are the connector. Or it could be that they're extremely successful in their career, and perhaps this is a career that you are just starting out in. Whatever the case may be, there is going to be a distinct, marked difference between your power and their power. Theirs is going to be much higher than yours. Number two, a sexual predator is someone who is incredibly disarming. They come off so kind, approachable, charismatic, charming, all of these wonderful characteristics, and They are interested in you, not only in your career growth and your career development, but you as a person and what you have to say, your ideas. Which brings me to point number 3. They will make themselves extremely accessible to you by phone, by email, in person. Naturally, you are of course going to want to speak with them. And so you set up a meeting where you can actually discuss your career goals and different opportunities. This is where things take a downhill turn. When you actually go to meet with them, number 4, boundaries are suddenly going to change. You will notice a shift in terms of their physical proximity to you. They may shake your hand a little bit longer than necessary, give you a hug that holds you a little too tight or a little too long. They may make off-color jokes about your appearance physically, what you're wearing, other people that you know. They also may invade your emotional headspace. And by that I mean they discuss personal details that aren't really what you would consider appropriate in a workplace setting with a coworker or colleague, let alone someone who's a mentor. They may fill you in about things that are going on in their personal life, vices that they have. This will feel strange to you because what they're trying to do is create a sense of closeness with you that does not actually exist. At the same time, he will talk to you about your career goals and opportunities while seamlessly weaving in conversation about things that are incredibly personal. And so this makes it very difficult for you to just want to get up and walk away and know that this is not a good situation for you to be in because they're actually giving you helpful advice. And so this creates the next warning sign, which are blurred lines. They are weaving in conversation about these different topics simultaneously, and it makes it very difficult to evaluate them and recognize that it's time to leave the situation. During the course of this meeting, or after it's over, he will make to you false promises. This is the next sign to look for. These false promises will be offers to connect you with people that are so beyond your reach. It may be that he suggests promotions or positions for you that you thought you would not be eligible for years. But that's where the fairy tale ends. From that point forward, any steps you tried to take regarding those career advancements that he suggested, he will diminish, deter, or dismiss. The only help he will give you from this point on is going to be in the form of discussions about the opportunities on his terms. Do not believe him. He does not plan to follow through. He does not plan to help you. His only interest is to take advantage of you. Ask yourself, if after your first meeting, he has suggested that he will put you in touch with someone, he has suggested that this is just the first of many meetings, or makes some sort of grand sweeping promise about something that will definitely happen, does he take steps to do it? Most likely he does not, because this promise, this offer, that is his bait to keep your interest, because he knows that that is the only way to maintain a connection to you. He is going to milk it for as long as he can to see how far he can push you and how much he can get out of you before he has to let go. I hate to say it, but sometimes the biggest self-proclaimed champions of women are the biggest offenders. This is where you need to let your gut and these warning signs take over. You are not crazy. It is not all in your head. In this next video, I'm going to lay out some steps you can take to best safeguard yourself, because you should never be in this position. But since you are, there are things that you can do.
Okay, hold on a second here.
Hi, I'm Chelsea, and I appreciate your.
All right, there was another video. I might have to go back to.
I'm so glad that so many men and women are.
Let me see if I can find it here.
The 2008 movie Taken.
Because I viewed it either. Okay, I think it's here. They talk.
Mark, thank you. Super Bowl 54 is in the record books, but the weeks before and after these big games are the focus of sting operations and raids by the FBI and local authorities.
That's because sex and labor traffickers are drawn to major sporting events. This year, Miami transit stations and Florida airports displayed signs about human trafficking and how to spot victims. The campaign started after dozens of criminals were arrested during the 2019 and 2017 Super Bowls.
Joining us now is former prosecutor and United Nations advisor, Mary David. Good morning, Mary. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good to see you too.
So tell us about this public service campaign encouraging people, and we've all heard say something if you see something. Tell us how this is focused on this topic here, though.
It is so important if people think that there's a situation of potential trafficking to just report it to the tip line. It never hurts to speak up if you're unclear about the situation. And we do know that the local campaign in Los Angeles from people reporting things to the tip line has actually increased reporting from the awareness campaign by 1,000%
Wow.
to the national and local human trafficking hotline. So it is effective.
Yeah.
It is working.
Yeah. You say there are 5 signs, or you're going to share 5 signs to spot human trafficking in plain sight. The first sign is branding and tattoos.
Traffickers actually tattoo their victims, brand them with derogatory terms or their name to signify their control and ownership over the victim. They will often do this across their cheek or above their eyebrow, and when you see this, it's often an indication of human trafficking.
The second sign raises a red flag for people who lie about their age. How is that a telltale sign?
Underage victims of sex trafficking will often say that they are 18 in order to prevent their trafficker from in any way being indicted as part of that. So while they may face a minor charge of prostitution, they are keeping their trafficker safe from being involved in a crime of committing human trafficking with a minor. And you also have to worry about this in the context of people who are undocumented, who also worry about just any implications that could fall through if they say anything about their age.
Another sign is if you ask someone what is your home address and they don't have one, that's a possible symptom, or however you describe it?
Unfortunately, traffickers will move their victims from place to place, location to location, to evade law enforcement. This is just another mechanism also for keeping victims from building any real relationships and being grounded in anything outside of their trafficker. Now their exploitation is their entire world. Everywhere they go, the only thing that's constant is that trafficking and their trafficker.
The next sign would involve where people become victims of traffickers and how they go about doing that. Explain that for us.
Well, traffickers are actually targeting homeless youth, runaways, and those who are in and out of the foster care system. What all of these populations have in common is that they are a group that lacks any sort of stability or support network around them. Traffickers know this, so they're actually going to bus stops, to homeless shelters, to group homes, and they're actually targeting those individuals because they know that they don't have access to any real resources of stability that they're desperately craving.
Your final sign is about people who work long hours without taking breaks. They're routinely transported in groups to those work sites. And we heard just last week, we reported about this fact. The 3 leaders of the Kingdom of Jesus Christ Church here in Southern California in Van Nuys were arrested on human trafficking charges. They're accused of tricking followers into becoming fundraisers and then arranging sham marriages to keep them in the U.S. This is labor trafficking and sex trafficking merging, it seems.
Absolutely. This is a situation where you have victims, and in that case, for example, they were reported to be sleeping in their cars and working for very long hours. Unfortunately, what happens is these are people who don't get sick days, vacation days, or any time off of work. Often where they live and where they sleep and work are all in the same unit, which just compounds this issue of them being exploited and not having a means of escaping.
Yeah, Mary, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in this morning. Mary David is a former prosecutor and an anti-sexual exploitation advocate who travels the country speaking to groups and raising awareness about human trafficking.
Okay, let me see. Let's check out another one from her.
The 2008 movie Taken depicted human traffickers
That was the last one, but she made a lot of good points, and I like what they said about the Super Bowl. So that is the #1 trafficking weekend of the year in the U.S. So be aware of that and the sign. So we'll look at that more in the future. Have a good day.